At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
How are all voices in our community heard as choices are made that affect our lives? How is the voice of the community sought out and respected before decisions are made? How can we tell if a community is truly engaged in the decisions that affect them, and what are the consequences if they are not? Joining us today in partnership with the American Leadership Forum to discuss community engagement are Kim Williams of Building Healthy Communities, Joe Barr of Capital Public Radio, and Daryl Roberts of the Roberts Family Development Center. Kim, what does community engagement mean to you?
You know, it's a very broad question, but I think for me what community engagement really means is getting the folks who live, work, eat, play in a community the opportunity to come and give voice to an issue, but then actually see it happen. And when you actually see whatever they're asking for to be changed or to be implemented, they actually see it take place, that's when you really see true community engagement, because it's having a voice and then giving your voice, people hearing your voice and acting on it.
Daryl, does community engagement really happen across all sectors of our community?
I think locally, you'd like to think it does. The reality is that, you have governmental and institutional organizations that make decisions, and oftentimes they ask for community input, but I'm not sure they recognize what Kim was talking about when they actually are changing based on the community input or based on an agenda that already has been set. Oftentimes in our community, that's one of our examples to us of if somebody's listening. When we attend a meeting, when we sit down in a public setting or we sit down in a private setting, are you really making changes based on what we talked about? Are you really, slowing down your process to hear what people are concerned about? And that's often a challenge because bureaucracies and institutions have their own rhythm that they follow. But if you want to have true community input, you have to change your rhythm to listen to the people who are most affected by your decisions.
Joe, in the press's role of looking at the community and analyzing different things that go on like that, do you see community engagement used as just been described in order to really pull out what's going on in the thoughts and minds of the people that live in different communities? Or is it more, as Daryl alluded to, that sometimes happens, astroturfing?
Well, I think I really thought Kim's definition was a very good one for how we view community engagement. But then, of course, we're a news organization. So part of it was when we began our community engagement initiative, it was really about understanding that the old paradigm of news coverage is waning, this idea of a reporter parachuting into a community somewhere and getting a story and then leaving. You can't do that anymore and get the true story.
What's the new paradigm?
The new paradigm is community engagement. It's this idea that you go into a community, you build relationships over time, you build trust. And then you take that relationship, and for us, we turn it into content. It's about getting the deep stories, the nuanced stories, the details, really getting into people's lives, and then also allowing them to take what we do into their lives and continue on. So if it's a significant issue, for instance, we did a documentary on high school dropouts. We allowed them to take our content and use it in their discussions. We created
Really?
We did, and I think that's a good thing for us. It's a good thing for them. Gives our content legs, takes it out into the community. People are still viewing and listening to the stories that we produced for this documentary almost 2 years ago. And it's good for them because it gives them a tool to use as they're talking with other people in their community and in other places.
It almost sounds that your news organization becomes almost part of the process in a way.
And that's where we have to be very careful, because as a news organization, it's not our role to advocate for any particular solution, any particular side. It's our role to depict the situation and give voice to people who are part of that situation. And then they can take that information. Of course, there's that old adage, information is power. It's about empowering people with information, and then they can take that into the community and do what they will with it. And if it creates impact, if it sparks something in a community, which we really like to see happen, but we don't define what kind of impact we want specifically with organizations, I think that's a great thing. And that's what you want as a news organization, is to have impact and to give people information for them to make decisions.
How can an engaged community be different than one that is not? You work with low-income communities, Kim, and I'm curious, have you seen a difference between when you go into a community to start an initiative different than as you start to build bridges and give people an opportunity to weigh in on decisions that affect them?
Definitely. When we began building healthy communities 4 or 5 years ago, what we saw were certain portions of the community, they weren't engaged at all. You had other portions that really were, and where you saw the difference was the folks who were really engaged in what was happening in their communities were because they were a part of the process of what was happening. So you saw folks going to neighborhood association meetings. You saw folks, parents participating in the schools and in PTAs. You saw, parents at the Little League games and the soccer games, and, having moms having conversations about different things. If there was an issue with trash on the street, they knew how to work together to remove those things. Whereas in other communities, you didn't see that infrastructure because you didn't see the investment of the community in those populations. A lot of that has to do with, and where we work in our area, is you have folks who actually live there and own homes there, but then you also have areas where you have a lot of renters and folks who maybe not be as invested because they may not be there for a very long period of time. They may live there for several years but have to move later for different reasons. So I think sometimes you have folks who don't necessarily get as involved because their roots aren't as strong. Whereas in other parts, you have folks who've lived there. Like if you go into some maybe the areas we've worked in within Oak Park, you've got folks who've lived generations of folks who are living there. So you often see much more engagement in some of those communities. So it really does have to do with that.
And I think what Kim hit on in a way is what's in the community already, because that in itself defines how active the community is.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you have a Little League, you have activities going on, you have a neighborhood association, you have natural partnerships that are developed of those people participate there. So then when you have an issue in the community, there are partnerships that have already been created so that you don't have to get to know each other to go after an issue that's of importance to you, but you already have a common set of issues that you already work on. My kids on Little League like your kids are. I go to a neighborhood association like you do. We're concerned about crime in the neighborhood. Let's talk to the police chief. Let's talk about talk to the captain in the neighborhood. Let's talk to the council member. Let's talk to the school board member who represents us. But people already know some of that because they already, as Kim says, working within the process. They're already active at their schools. The other part to that is how do we educate those who are not connected and make them understand their importance, not the importance.
Yeah, because it begs the question, why is it important for a community to be engaged? We elect people to represent us. Why is it important for us to be so involved?
And if we look at the situation where somebody's elected, that's an individual, but it's still a community's effort that changes the community. The council member or the elected person plays the point position, but the other members have a role. Other people in the community have a role, and it's important that everybody plays their role, whether it be as to the neighborhood elder, whether it be part of the young brigade that's trying to make changes, whether it be part of that brigade of folks who have ideas that they want to see implemented. They all play a role. It always excites me when I see a neighborhood that elects someone from their community to be an officer, no matter what office it is. The challenge for that community is not just electing that person, but staying engaged in the process that they helped elect that person too. So if you elect a new council member, are you really paying attention to what's happening at city council? If you elected a new school board representative, are you attending school board meetings, or at least are you understanding what's coming down the pike around education issues?
Wow.
And sometimes, just to build on what you're saying, we found that the elements are there in a community, but maybe they haven't connected with each other. And so we found when we did our initiative in Stockton, we brought a lot of different organizations and individuals together as part of the process. And many of them were very aligned in what they were trying to do. They had similar goals. They didn't know about each other.
Really?
They had not worked together. And so through this process, they came together and then they were able to build on that. And that was a really interesting outcome to the initiative that we did. And it was something that we didn't foresee, actually, was this idea that there are these people who are all trying to do the same things and they have the same goals or very similar goals, and yet they don't know about each other.
What did you learn?
In terms of just the initiative itself?
In terms of what kept these people apart?
I think that, as we all know in our lives, we can get into silos. We're very focused on what we're doing, and we sometimes just need somebody to say, hey, there's more out there. I think it's as simple as that. I think that it's just a matter of having that one moment where you are brought together with other people and you realize, wow, we have all of these things in common. And then you take it from there. I think it's just as simple as that.
I think the education piece is really key as well. One of the things that you see is sometimes folks aren't engaged because they just don't know how to be engaged. And so one of the things that we did was we did a resident academy where we brought 30 residents together over an 8-month period, once a month, to here's just, if you have trash on your street, here's how you call someone to do that. If you have an issue, here's how who you can call, who you can contact. How do you talk to your neighbors about issues, and how do you come together to fight those things? And it opened up a whole new avenue that those folks then went out and, during the voting time, they went door to door knocking on doors, get out to vote, get out to vote. And we saw an increase from 14% to 68% of folks who went to vote.
Really?
Because people went and knocked on doors. And these were just residents who weren't really necessarily engaged in a lot of different things, just wanted to know. It was your the PTA mom, the soccer mom, the dad who, is going back to school and he's the stay-at-home dad now. These were just regular residents who wanted to learn more. And so when you put them in that point where they learn how to do it for themselves, it's powerful. It's powerful.
There's a conventional wisdom, Kim, that says that people are just apathetic today. Decline in voter participation, decline in being part of organizations, whether it's a neighborhood association or a bowling league or anything like that. People are just not engaged. We're all watching our devices, cocooned in our little space, whatever that may be. It sounds like, from what the three of you are saying, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be so. But do you think that there's something that we as a society are missing in terms of pulling people into greater connectivity with each other in order to better their own circumstances within their communities?
I think one of the things, Daryl said it earlier when he made a comment about community input. One of the phrases I have a tendency to use a lot is authentic engagement. And for me, what that means is it's not going to them already with something prescribed and saying, because I already have an end result that I want, but actually authentically wanting their opinion. Right. And if I have an idea that I already want to do and I want input, then I need to be open and honest about that.
Let me just interrupt you by asking this question. Are many of the processes that people are asked to engage in pre-cooked, and so therefore it generates a level of cynicism as to, well, they want me to show up, but to go back to Daryl's point, they really don't want my response?
That is the general feeling a lot of folks, residents have. I mean, even when we started our project 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of like, you really already know what you want to do. What are we doing this for? And so it is. And you see a lot of institutions, a lot of government entities who they really already know what they want, but they want to check that box.
Check the box.
I mean, that's just the reality. They want to check the box. And so residents, they're hip to that game. So you have a town hall and you want to have this issue and only, 20 people show up. Well, that's because the rest of them kind of feel like you're just checking off the box. You really don't want to hear what I have to say because you're not going to change anything. Yeah. And I think that's the part around resident engagement. It's an ongoing struggle, that we all have to work with, is how do you do it in a way so that you can get have the trust in the relationship that you need, and that they actually see the difference that you actually want to see occur. And I think that's where we run into trouble a lot, is that there's a mistrust there because they've seen it happen time and time again.
Joe, and to go to that mistrust, what is the role of the press with regards to sort of watchdogging processes that are ostensibly about helping us better a particular issue or a community?
Yeah. I think our role is actually very simple. It's to tell stories about people and how those people are involved in the big issues of our area, of our time. And through doing that, you can learn about solutions. You can learn about what individuals are doing to make things better. I mean, I think that's really our role. And that may be a very simplistic answer, but I think it comes back to the fact that there is, I think, a larger shift that's happening in our society, in that it used to be very top-down, and that's how processes happen. That's how community engagement happened, where it was kind of fixed at the beginning, and then, well, but we do want to hear from you. But really, people in a back room somewhere had made a decision that was about what was going to happen. And now it really is, there's been, and I just see this in so many places now, this idea that we need to really talk to people, and it's a ground up kind of process involving them. And that's where it's really exciting from a journalism perspective, because that's where you get the nuanced stories, the deep stories, the true stories, because you have buy-in from people. They want to tell you exactly what's happening to them. They want to open up their lives to you. And they know you're not just using them for something else. They know that you have a solid intention behind what you're doing, and something is going to come out of it too. And that's a big part of this, is that there have to be results for people. They have to see the content that we produce.
Is it though still a very much a intimate, face-to-face, one-on-one type of engagement that drives your content, or is this evolution you're describing something where technology has a role or has had a role in it?
I think successful community engagement involves both. And the mistake that is made a lot of times is that it's one or the other, and increasingly it's more about technology. And people think that engagement is really about Twitter and Facebook, and that's how you can get people's input and involvement. I think the most effective engagement still is person to person, on the ground, bringing people together in a room to have an actual discussion. Social media can aid that, and it can play a role to bring people together and to further the conversation, but that human contact is still really important.
What drives my question, folks, is that I sometimes get a little bit skeptical when we talk about community engagement, because it seems that it's either siloed or it's stratified. And so, for instance, you have things where a social class of people will be engaged in a dialogue, and we'll say, okay, the community's been engaged, but not all forms of engagement are available to all individuals. And so when we say we've taken the pulse of the community, what does that really mean? Recently there's a initiative started called Village Square, which wants to get people together, and they're doing their best to do outreach. But one of the things that they're trying to be mindful of is how do you really have a town hall conversation, but only the same 16 people show up that always show up?
Who did you invite, though? I mean, that to me is the question. Who did you invite? Did you really look around the community and ask for leaders, or did you simply say, I'm going to pick, the typical leaders and invite them because they're going to give me the answer that I'm looking for? Cynicism occurs because people don't feel like their input really does matter, or that the process that are set in place have already, as Joe said, been rigged, or has already been decided what's going to happen. For me, I think institutions have to recognize, if they talk about transparency, not only do they need to be transparent, open to the public, but they also have to be willing to follow their own processes of decision making, but also to listen throughout that process. Because if you're talking about changing people's reason for getting involved, you have to give them another reason to get involved. They have to feel like they're being listened to. They have to feel like that their involvement matters, but also they have to recognize that you are now asking them to participate, to be around the table and have input.
Daryl, you sound a little bit like a connoisseur of being engaged in these things. How do you tell the difference between when somebody really wants the input of the communities and constituencies you represent, and when they're coming in to check the box? What's the tell?
When you actually change your idea based on our conversation. Your direction started off to be going this way, and after we talked, you literally say, you know something? I get you, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this work. Let me try this, which is something you offered me as a solution or an approach. That wasn't what I was thinking about when you walked in the room, but because you're in the room, because your voice is being listened to, that you actually we're actually going to change what we're going to do. I think what Kim's doing in South Sacramento is a good example, funded by the endowment. How do you bring a community to
California
the table?
endowment.
California endowment, and how do you bring them to the table, bring people to the table, and really listen to what they're asking you to do. And the ideas that are generated are ideas that are being generated by the community. I think that that's an example of how you get communities engaged. Sometimes you see people come into a community say, we want to hear your input. Here's a list of things we think we want you to talk about.
Kim, you're doing this work for the endowment, and it's called Building Healthy Communities. And in just a capsule, what is it exactly?
Building Healthy Communities is an initiative that is designed, it's a 10-year initiative. And so what we're looking at doing is working with the community and organizations who serve that community to make it stronger, healthier, and in all kinds. It's not just about health from the perspective of doctor health, but is it safe and walkable? You know, how are the schools? What's happening at the school levels? Or do people have access to fresh fruit and vegetables? You know, are there parks for kids to play in? You know, so it covers pretty much everything.
So what is the
health.
role of community engagement in that process?
It's the number one. We had a plan. We had to put a plan in place, and that plan was not signed off on until the community had an opportunity to give voice. So we surveyed, did town halls, did door to door, did small group forums with about 7,000 to 8,000 residents who lived in that area.
7,000 to 8,000, and this is in South Sacramento, California.
It was about 7,000 adults and about another 1,000 young people.
How were you all received at first?
Kind of with cynicism, really. Yeah, really. It really was, because it was, here comes this endowment with all this money, 10 years. You know, what are you really trying to do? You know, what does this really mean? And
it sounds almost like the parachuting that Joe says that the press is.
There are a lot of similarities.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and it took some time, and it's even now we're 5 years in, we're still are trying to build that solid base, and we're learning from the community. This is not working. You guys need to do better. So you know, it's an ongoing process for us, but we used pretty much every different type of engagement process you can think of to try to get that information back.
And I think the spin-off effect of their community engagement piece was seen when there was school closures in Sacramento City School District. You saw families who were connected to Kim's activities that understood their role when it came down to school, the fact that they had a say-so. Now, granted, maybe the way that it turned out wasn't with the way they wanted to, but at least they understood what role they could play. The fact that you attended board meetings, the fact you made your voice heard. Now, the next step for those who disagreed is you unelect or you elect folks who will listen to you differently next time. But that's part of the community engagement process that our communities have to become more sophisticated about and more connected to.
Is there really at the root of this a legitimacy issue, which is that the people that are usually asking for engagement are the folks who already have an idea of something that they want to get done. And so there's a bit of checking the box. And when you say expanding leadership, there's a legitimacy issue. Well, Roberts Family Development Center, you work on trying to elevate the aspirations of kids and families within the Del Paso Heights area. You know, what legitimacy have you on a land use decision? Kim, for the communities that you represent, what legitimacy do they have on the siting of a big plant or something like that? How is it that you empower people so that they feel like I'm legitimate because I guess because I exist and I am a stakeholder as well?
I think that's the really fascinating part of this process, and we've been doing this for now about 2.5 years. We have a fantastic community engagement specialist named Jessica Maria Ross, and she completely upended my view of what community engagement is. And it starts out what I originally thought it was we're going to have a convening and we're going to invite people and you're all going to come. But really this is about people having a stake in what happens, having a voice, and they feel empowered. And I think one of the big things that I've seen that's really, in terms of being in journalism for 20 years, one of the most gratifying things that I've seen is people who've been part of this process, young people that we've engaged, people who are hungry that we've engaged in different projects. They have a voice, somebody has listened to them, and they feel like they've had a platform and they've had a say in something significant, which for some people has never happened to them before. And that alone gives them empowerment and gives them something that they didn't have before.
It also means that when those of us who are advocates who are in the rooms talking about planning, talking about those things, we make people understand why our communities are valid, their issues are important, and that their opinions do matter. Sometimes when we sit in rooms and we don't, and we, we're polite and we try to, navigate through a conversation without being straightforward, you really lose people. You lose them because they don't get the authentic, organic discussions that occur in our community, which is, look, this is not fair to our communities to locate this project in our neighborhood without our involvement.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all for your time. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.